Welcome to 30 Minutes on the Parasha with our friend for the year, Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. Um, this week's Parsha is VaYakhel-Pikudei. These are the last two Parshios in the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus. They are frequently read together. They are a kind of pair thematically as well. Um, but what's interesting is they are predominantly, or at least prima facie, substantially a repetition, a recapitulation of the features of the Mishkan, the vestments of the Kohanim. There is some other material as well, but to a great extent, the Torah doesn't present obviously, or as I say, apparently, um, novel material, and it makes it slightly more challenging, maybe for one who seeks to elucidate or to understand the significance or look for deeper meaning within these psukim, of which there are many, more than 200 in the combined parshios. So that's just by way of brief introduction. And I would like to mention the beginning of the Sedra, and we will get back to it in the course of our studies tonight. So let's turn, if you are with me in this stone Chumash, to page 516. In any Chumash that you may be using, we're in Exodus chapter 35, the first few psukim. Now, I said that the two parshias deal with the construction of the Mishkan, the materials, how much silver and gold, etc., was collected, what was done with each of those components. Not only the precious metals, but the gemstones, the wood, the dyes that were used for the purpose of, of decorating and embroidering and enhancing and conforming to the divine requirements of building the Mishkan. There is, however, a short and important passage which is a companion. It's, you could say, almost introductory, and that's what we're looking at right now. These are the things that God has commanded to do them. And probably the understanding is that it's a reference to maybe what preceded, but more obviously what follows. But the irony is that the immediate subsequent pasuk doesn't talk about the things that God commanded to do. Actually, it talks about when one is restricted from doing any kind of constructive malacha. Sheish yasamim teyaseh malacha, for 6 days work may be done. V'imashvi yelachem Shabbos Shabbason Ladunoi, but on the seventh day will be a holy Sabbath, a Sabbath of Sabbaths to God. Whoever does malacha, whoever engages in malacha, which we're not going to translate right now, it doesn't concern us at the moment. The exact translation of malacha, we can think of it as constructive labor. You will be put to death. Lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem b'yom Shabbos. And then the Torah adds on a further pasuk, which clearly is pertinent to the one that immediately preceded about Shabbos, what's kind of malacha is restricted on Shabbos, and the Torah says, do not kindle a fire in all of your habitations on the Sabbath day. Now, this is one of the 39 malachos of Shabbos, havara, kindling a fire. It is important in ways that we'll discuss in due course, but the Talmud already and the Mefarshim seek to understand the significance of the Torah singling out that particular malacha. And as I said, we will return to that, but for the moment, I just want to now fast forward to the very end, because what I want to just derive from this opening passage is the emphasis which the Torah evidently places on lighting a fire, kindling a fire, or possibly allowing a fire to burn in your home. Actually, the correct application of this restriction is do not light a fire. As it says in the art scroll here, you shall not kindle fire. It doesn't mean you shall not allow a fire to burn. That was the view of the Karaim, the Karaites, and they were of the understanding, that is to say, interpreted the pasuk to mean, do not allow any fire to burn for the illumination, for heat, for food preparation, in your home on Shabbos. So whereas we light candles before Shabbos to illuminate the house, but the Karaites would meticulously extinguish the fires in the house before Shabbos because that's how they understood, or in our view, in the rabbinic tradition, misunderstood this pasuk. But that's just parenthetical about the word seva ru'esh. But the Torah clearly attaches particular importance to the malacha of a fire, lighting a fire on Shabbos. Now, what I want to focus on for the most part, and what we just introduced, is a component of what we'd like to uh, elucidate, but I want to focus on the last passage in the Parsha of Pikudei, which is also the last verses in the book of Exodus. And according to many of the Mefarshim, it is like a coda for the book of Exodus. It is the concluding flourish, and in a way is the capstone on the book of Exodus. Moreover, as Abarbanel points out, we have seen repeatedly in the book of Exodus a reference to a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud, or a cloud, or the clouds of glory. We have fire as a metaphor for the revelation of at the time of giving of the Torah, and we find fire and like the twin imagery of the fire and the smoke, or the fire and the cloud, as symbolizing the presence of Hashem, maybe representing the presence of Hashem. And that imagery finds its expression also here in the last paragraph in the Sedra, and as I said, is the last paragraph in the book of Exodus. If you look with me on page 540 in the Stone Chumash, but whichever Chumash you may be looking at, it's verses 34 onward from the chapter 40, the end of the book of Shmos. VaYakhase ananes ohel moed, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, uchvod Hashem aleis hamishkan, and the glory of God filled the sanctuary, filled what's called tabernacle, the Mishkan, which has been the subject of the last 4 or 5 sedras, even more than that, in our Torah reading. Moshe could not enter because the cloud kept him out. Now, of course, the cloud probably was not impenetrable in a physical sense, but if, as we're suggesting, and as the Torah itself implies, it represents or somehow is a manifestation of the glory of Hashem, Moshe was unwilling or unable to, barge in. And again, the Torah says the glory of God filled the Mishkan. When the cloud ascended Yisuf in Israel, then it was an indicator there was time for the Jewish people to travel. And this, again, is a bit obscure because we don't know anything about travels. So far, they are still at Har Sinai. It's true that they're expecting very soon to enter the land of Israel, but the idea, as the Torah will describe later on, because of unfortunate events that follow, that they would be actually wandering in the wilderness for years and years, that is not something which the reader or the people at the time would have anticipated. So it's interesting that the Torah refers to the cloud which ascends Yisuf and Israel b'chol ma'asehem, in all of their travels. V'im lo ya'aleh hanan v'lo yisru ad yom ha'elah. So if the cloud did not ascend, then they wouldn't travel until it ascended. Ki anan Hashem al mishkan yomam, because the cloud of God was on the Mishkan during the day. Ve'esh tiyeh laila bo, and there was fire at night. Leinei kol bnei Yisrael b'chol ma'asehem, before the eyes of all Israel in all of their travels. The Mishkan was the manifestation or the physical, symbolic place where Hashem's presence was manifest within the Jewish people. And according, again, Ramban says that the Mishkan was a kind of portable Har Sinai. If the exodus from Egypt was for the purpose of receiving the Torah, for the purpose of being inducted into the service of God, into the covenant, into the cosmic, almost marriage relationship with Hashem, in which the giving of the Torah is likened to a kind of metaphorical marriage celebration. and the Jewish people and Hashem are now forged together with a union, a covenant for all time, then the Mishkan is the means by which that covenant finds its expression. Or to put it differently, the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, they acquired the relationship with Hashem, they established the relationship with Hashem, and when they built the Mishkan and the presence of Hashem is in their midst, they have achieved the purpose of the Exodus. Of course, they still have their national destiny to be realized in the land of Israel, but this is certainly an important, crucial milestone. So, with that introduction, let me just tell you that Abarbanel has a fascinating, profound, and extended essay on the significance of the cloud, of the fire, and of the light, and the light of redemption. So I want to share with you some aspects of what he says, and I hope that it will enable us to gain a deeper understanding of the symbolism and why the Torah uses regularly these concepts of fire, light, the cloud as a metaphor for the presence of Hashem. So he starts, and I'm not again going to seek to summarize his whole essay, but he tries to identify the word kavod Hashem, which appears in Pasuk Lamed Dalet. It appears in Pasuk Lamed Hey, Kavod Hashem Malei Hamishkan. It says that twice actually in those two psukim. Each time it says Kavod Hashem Malei Hamishkan. Again, Kavod Hashem Malei Hamishkan. It's clear that the Kavod Hashem is associated somehow with the cloud, with the fire. So Abarbanel says that the Rambam and others maintain that Hashem created light, but darkness is only the absence of light. Now, I'm not going to seek to analyze this from a scientific standpoint, but rather from a conceptual standpoint. And that perspective that darkness is merely the absence of light is a commonplace in the understanding of the opening passage of the Torah. God said that there be light. L'choshech kara laila, and then Hashem called the night, the darkness, he called it night. But of course, darkness is only meaningful once we have light. Before there was light, then darkness had no meaning. But Abarbanel challenges that. Abarbanel is of the view that Hashem created light and Hashem created darkness. He even goes so far as to say that when we read at the very beginning of the Torah, Vayomer Hashem Yehi Or, let there be light, then at the same time, he also created a form of darkness. He created a cloud, Anan. He associates our fire from our Parasha here, which again is a metaphor that appears many times in the book of Exodus with their travels and all of that. He associates it with the light of Hashem himself. The darkness of the creation, when Hashem separated between the light and the darkness, he associates with the cloud. Now, he explains as follows. Of course, clouds are a symbol of darkness, are a symbol of that which obscures the sun. But for those living in the Middle East, and I'm sure it's true even to this day, excuse me, to a great extent, they crave the clouds because the clouds are associated with rain. They live, as our ancestors did, and it remains the case to this day, with water scarcity, especially in the land of Israel, as opposed to Bavel, where, they have more rain and they have rivers, etc. The land of Israel suffers from water scarcity. And therefore, they are reliant on the rainfall and they are reliant on the clouds to produce the rain. Says Abarbanel as follows. He says that the sun he says that natural fire takes two forms. Takes the form of the sun, which and it takes the form of fire on earth. He says they each share the same two components, the same two properties. They are a source of light and a source of heat. And they're very beneficial, and we could not survive very well without them. And nevertheless, if the sun is too hot or too bright, of course, anyone who tries to look at the sun could, will suffer damage to his eyesight. Um, and therefore, the brightness of the sun can be too much of a good thing. The heat of the sun can be too much of a good thing, but certainly the heat of fire and fire that's out of control can cause catastrophic damage and catastrophe. At the same time, harnessing the warmth of a fire is exceedingly beneficial. Of course, until the creation of, or the discovery or cultivation of electricity and other forms of artificial light, the only way to generate light was through a flame. And of course, people used exactly that. So he says that the light of Hashem, however, it is only used as a light is only used as a metaphor for the presence of God. So he says that a cloud is a bit similar in that the cloud is something which can obscure the sun. If it's very dark cloud, it can actually almost bring about a darkness on earth. On the other hand, the clouds that are sort of performing a function in a favorable way can provide some shade from the heat of the sun, but much more importantly, can provide rain. And rain is something which is so valuable, so essential. And yet, too much rain can create flooding and devastation as well. He says therefore the light and the clouds, he said, are like in balance with one another. And we need both of them, and we need both of them in the right measure. So he maintains that when the Torah says "choshech al pnei sahom vayomer Elokim lihi or," well, the "choshech al pnei sahom," when God created heaven and earth, etc. Again, I don't want to go deeply into the parshanut there, but it says the darkness preceded the light until Hashem said, "Let there be light." According to Abarbanel, Hashem created the clouds at that time as well. He created that which can obscure the sun, but that which is the essential companion to the sun in sustaining life, because the clouds produce rain, and without rain, there's no without water, without water, there's no life, and without clouds, there's no water, especially rainwater. But ultimately, even the rivers, etc., are nourished through the rains. So he says that the sun and the clouds, and therefore Abravanel rejects the notion that Hashem is symbolized only by light, but the darkness don't sort of like attribute that to God. Or I mean, I don't want to suggest that any Jewish thinker is of the view that darkness derives from a different source than Hashem. But again, we typically think of darkness as the sort of the rival or possibly the antagonist of the light. But Abravanel shows that in terms of using the term anan as a cloud as a stand-in for darkness, it's actually something which is beneficial, even to the point that it is used as a metaphor for the presence of Hashem himself, as we saw explicitly in these verses, that Moshe could not go into the Mishkan because the cloud was there. Well, anyone who's walked around in fog, or maybe climbed mountains or taken a ski lift up to the mountains, or anyone who's been in an airplane, has certainly been in a space which is effectively in the clouds, and there's no physical impediment to progress. You may have a difficulty seeing at a distance, but there's no physical obstacle to entering a space where there's a cloud. So clearly it means that Moshe was, maybe overwhelmed is not quite the right term for Moshe Rabbeinu, that he was overwhelmed by it, but he sensed that unless he's summoned, he's not going to enter, because it represents the presence of Hashem. Now, light, of course, is a highly conventional metaphor for Hashem. And we find that in many places. Abarbanel uses a beautiful turn of phrase. I don't know if it's original with him. It may well be. He says that the we will learn not now, but in the summer when whether in our shiurim here, I'm just saying in the Torah in the summer parshas in Bamidbar will describe the division of the tribes of Israel into separate sectors within the encampment. So they did not just encamp in a kind of open seating, haphazard way. Perhaps they did initially, but the Torah subsequently specifies where each of the tribes shall position themselves. And the Torah describes, actually, and with a lot of precision, the encampment in which the Mishkan is in the center, and Moshe and Aharon were encamped in the immediate vicinity, and the tribe of Levi surrounded the Mishkan, and the other tribes, each of the other 12 tribes, counting Ephraim and Manasseh as two separate tribes, occupied the four wings, so north, east, south, west, three tribes in each of those directions. And the Torah identifies the degel. Degel literally is a flag, and it really was a flag. It seems it was a banner, and there had a certain emblem on each of the tribes of Israel. We have later on, we'll read Degel Machane Ephraim, Degel Machane Reuven. Each tribe had its Degel, representing that tribe and also representing spatially its position within the camp. Abarbanel has a beautiful turn of phrase. If you remember one phrase from tonight, I would suggest commit this one to your memory archives. Says that the light is Degel Machane Shechina, the emblem, the insignia, or the banner of Machane Shechina, of the part of the camp, of the space allocated to the Shechina, is light. So just as the other tribes, like Yehuda had a lion as his emblem, and the others had, each one was, their emblem was something associated with that tribe. So, of course, Hashem doesn't need a literal flag to represent him, but he says, or Hanivra, the light which is created, that is to say, the light which we are familiar with, that is the indicator of the presence of the Shekhinah. Degel Machane Shechina is or. But of course, light is only a metaphor for Hashem. When I say only a metaphor, light is light, but it's used as a metaphor for Hashem. He actually mentions that we find in the Kabbalistic writings that really light is Hashem. What we call light is a borrowed term. The Kabbalists invert the usual understanding. We think of light as something which we're fairly familiar with, and physicists know a lot more about it than I do. And we, utilize it, etc. And we say that it is a metaphor for Hashem. But the Kabbalists look at it the other way. They invert it. They say, on the contrary, light really represents Hashem himself. We call by that name light the physical phenomenon which we utilize, because it's a way that we can somehow imagine or grasp or conceive of Hashem himself. And the proof for that way of looking at it is that when Hashem created the world, he said, Yehi or, let there be light. And the Torah says, Vayhi or. I want to turn back to the very beginning of the Chumash, because Abarbanel observes something. Well, he quotes Ramban. He says he disagrees with Ramban, but to be honest, I can't quite see the big difference. To me, it seems that if he pretty much endorses what Ramban says. I'll tell you what that is right now. Bereshis bar Elohim es hashamayim v'haaretz v'haaretz haisaso vavohu, etc. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayhi or, and God said that there be light, and there was light. Then it says Vayah Hashem as ar kitov. God saw that the light was good, etc. Rashi says that Hashem saw that this light was so good, it was too good for the Reshaim to utilize, and therefore Hashem sequestered the light, he hid it away for the righteous in the world to come. So, what Rashi seems to mean is that the light of creation is a kind of what we would call primordial light. It is light that does not derive from the sun, nor does it derive from the fire on earth, nor, of course, does it derive from electricity or artificial light, obviously. It can't derive from any of those because none of that had been brought into existence yet. So the light that existed, therefore, when Hashem said Yehi Or, he just meant the light of God himself. And in that sense, that is the true light. That is the genuine, the absolute light, which we cannot really conceive or appreciate because that is the light of Hashem himself. Says Ramban, he notices that later on, in each stage of creation, the Torah says, Vayihi Chein. When Hashem said, let there be, so it says each time, Vayihi Chein. I'll show you where it says that. For example, if you look at the very beginning of the Torah, in verse 7, Hashem separated the higher waters and the lower waters, and it was so. It says in Pasuk Yud Aleph, in verse 11, the last words, each time the Torah says Vayichein, but with the light, it doesn't say Vayichein. Take another look at verse 3. Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or does not say Vayichein, and it was so. It says Vayihi Or. It says Ramban. The word Kain, meaning yes, also means it's like a statement of affirmation. It's a statement of the word kan also means a base. Esakiyarves kano. Chaf nun, meaning yes, meaning thus, meaning it is so, also means a base. In other words, Vayichein, Hashem said Vayichein each time in the stage of creation because it remained that way. That which Hashem did in the 6 days of creation remained that way. Hashem was establishing, was, if you like, creating the laws of nature. And the world has functioned ever since with only occasional miraculous aberrations from the laws of nature which Hashem established at that time. Says Ramban, but when it says Vayihi Or, the Torah says not Vayihi Chein, the Torah says Vayihi Or. God said that there be light, and there was light. Why? Because, says Ramban, the light did not remain. The light did not endure. Why not? Because of the reason that Rashi says that light was too ethereal. That light was too, ethereal is not really the right term. Ethereal has a technical meaning, which is not quite light. That light was too holy. That light is the light of God himself. That is the light that Hashem would use later on. Says Abarbanel, Hashem would use that light only on particular occasions when Hashem intervened or Hashem overrode the laws of nature in order to reintroduce that light. I want to just share with you a thought about that light, which does not come from Ramban, and then we'll get back to where we began with the reference to the fire on Shabbos. The Ramban says that the light of the creation was hidden away. Rashi says that as well, and it was sort of like utilized. That's what Abarbanel says, utilized on particular occasions. And according to Abarbanel, that is the light, which is the pillar of fire. That is the light like we have at the end of our Parasha, going back to the end of Pikudei, when the Torah says, Ki anan Hashem on the Mishkan Yomam, the cloud of God was on the Mishkan by day, ve'esh tia laila bo, and fire at night. Of course, this is not just fire like we have, but this is fire representing the fire of Hashem, representing the light of God. Where did that light come from? Or I would say, where have we seen that light before? No pun intended. At the beginning of the creation. That is the light, Vayihi Or. Vayihi Or, and the Torah says, Vayom Elokim Yehi Or Vayhi Or. It doesn't say Vayhi Chen, because the light that we experience, that we're familiar with, is only an echo, or to mix my metaphors, of the original light, which is the manifestation of Hashem Himself. Why does the Torah, or I would suggest, what insight can we derive from the fact that at the very beginning of our parsha, when the Torah provides a short prologue or a preface to all of these reflections, all of these this recapitulation of the Mishkan, why does the Torah mention Shabbos before? So the answer is that, and that is the correct answer, or the, let's say, the most obvious answer, is that there is a relation between Shabbos and the Mishkan, in order to say that the building of the Mishkan, this holy project, nevertheless does not justify the desecration of the Sabbath. The project of building the Mishkan is to be pursued for 6 days, but on the seventh day is a day of rest. That's the well-known, and that's the halachically valid reason for the association. But that does not explain the emphasis on the light, or on the fire. So I don't know where I read this or where I saw it. It's partly my own thoughts, but I'm sure it's not completely original with me. The fire that the Torah says, don't light a fire on Shabbos, don't kindle a fire on Shabbos, represents the primary means by which man uh, exploits or controls his environment or changes his environment. Although the 39 malachos share properties in common, and the primary property they share is they're all constructive. They all represent man's engagement with the natural world in order to improve it or to impact upon it, to fulfill his needs or his quest, his desire. Even planting a seed in the ground, it won't produce results instantly, but it's a means by which a person can cultivate the land, and that's a malachat on Shabbos, and that's true for all of them in various ways. In a way, fire exemplifies better than anything, better than any of the other examples, this capacity of man to exercise control over nature. In fact, scientists recognize man's ability to control fire as the pivotal, maybe the foundational achievement which distinguished him from the animals, which enabled man to exercise control over the animals. Perhaps I shouldn't say this on a recording, but obviously this is true in evolutionary terms, hasmi lazkir. But in our reckoning, in the Torah perspective, this is the means by which man fulfilled the charge at the dawn of human history, v'chivshuha. When Hashem says, the land, the world is yours, he says to Adam, and it's for you to demonstrate mastery and control over nature. Man has a duty of care for the world as well. But this is the primary means to which man exercises power and dominion over nature is through fire. Through fire, he can provide warmth. Through fire, he can cook his food, which makes it easier to digest. Through fire, he can keep the animals at bay. If he has a fire in his encampment, then he can sleep peacefully because the animals are afraid of the fire. In so many ways, which I don't need to elaborate upon, you can think of them yourselves. Man's ability to control fire represents the beginning of man's journey towards dominating the world. That's what you don't do on Shabbos. That's what you do for 6 days. But on Shabbos, we withdraw to the spiritual and we let nature take its own course. This is the symbolism of fire, and this, according to Abarbanel, is the reason why the presence of Hashem is likened not only to light, but also to the cloud, also to the darkness, because it's the interaction between the two, which he sees the darkness not just as the counterpart to the light, but in a more sophisticated way, of the cloud. The cloud is the counterpart to the light. And of course, as we said, the light of the sun enables photosynthesis and enables nature as we know it to function. And in a similar way, in a kind of companion way, in a complementary way, the clouds produce rain. And again, the rain is also essential for life itself. And because Hashem is the source of life, so therefore the presence of Hashem in a metaphorical language is associated with the light and with the darkness. And ultimately, this is going to be the light of redemption as well. That's why it says, B'chol mas ehem, the cloud will ascend. When the time is set to travel, means when the Jewish people in our journey through history, when the time comes for us to travel, to finally reach our ultimate destination with the arrival of Mashiach and the redemption of the Jewish people and all mankind, that is when the light of Hashem will once again be manifest. May it happen speedily in our days. I'm sorry I've gone over a few minutes, but as I said, it was a long essay. I hope I've done justice to at least a fraction of it, and thank you very much for listening.